let's talk about 4 similarities and differences between leadership and management. A video like this needs a few qualifications right up front. Having a title of manager or supervisor does not mean you are demonstrating leadership qualities. On the flip side, you don't need a leadership title to act as a leader in any given situation. But really, the majority of individuals I've met who have an official supervisory position do some managerial activities and some leadership activities, because these are not opposite sets of skills. They are complementary. Virtually every team and every organization needs both to thrive. In fact, as John O'Leary says in his article in the Harvard Business Review, the differences between managerial activities and leadership activities may all come down to the personality of the specific manager or leader that you're talking about. So these often blur and overlap right down to the level of the individual, depending upon their role, personality, and scope of their responsibilities. Given that background, let's compare and contrast. My approach today was to take several new and old articles from the Harvard Business Review and pull out the overlapping features in those articles about management and leadership. I'll put links to all 4 articles in the description below so that you can look at them yourself. Let's first look at these from a big picture perspective, and then we'll dig into the 4 specifics. From a big picture view, leadership is all about influence and empowerment. And unlike management, whether it's accurate or not, there's a mystique or a bit of mystery around what great leaders do and the power of their influence, as Abraham Zalesnik mentions in his Harvard Business Review articles, one of the articles we're looking at. When we think about the ability to attract and inspire followers, there's what you might call an X factor, or a hard to describe essence that some people call charisma, or at least communication confidence, that makes people want to follow the leader. That may be why some people see the concept of leadership as more interesting. We don't tend to think of management activities as having mystique. Let's talk about the essence of management. At the heart of it, management activities are driven by control, a rational mindset, and the coordination of others' activities. Abraham Zalesnik says again in his Harvard Business Review article, the manager asks this question: what problems have to be solved, and what are the best ways to achieve results so that people will continue to contribute to the organization? Management is about solving problems, accomplishing tasks, and maintaining the system. Now let's break that down into the 4 aspects of leadership and management that were repeated to some degree in the various articles in the Harvard Business Review that I looked at. First, they have different sources of power. A leader's power comes from their relationships and their ability to influence others in their expanding network of relationships. The manager's authority comes with their official position in the chain of command. This variable shows why people can be leaders without ever having an official job title and without any authority behind it. That's because leadership is about influence. Leaders can motivate, they can get people on board, they can gather people around them because they have that kind of connection, influence, and relationship with their followers. They have an expanding sphere of influence that is often driven by the force of their personality. Managers, in contrast, get their power from their job description. For example, if you're a supervisor and you're officially in charge of making the schedule, then that's your job to do. The task is tied to the role. Managers have what you might call decision-making power and authority. So let's say you're an ordinary employee. You don't have the authority just to start making everybody else's schedule. That's not part of your job description. A regular employee can't hire or fire people because that's literally not your job. The authority and responsibility to do those tasks is baked into the manager's job position in that hierarchy. They have the legal, rational backing of the institution to do those tasks. But the moment that manager or supervisor is no longer in that role, they don't have that authority. Those are specific tasks tied to the role. Your last supervisor, for example, from 2 years ago, no longer has the power to fire you or make your schedule. That power is tied to the position, not the person. In contrast, leadership is tied to the person. It's not dependent upon the job title. Leaders can continue to have an influence over people, even if they no longer work in the organization anymore. A true leader will almost never have to rely on the mentality that says, you have to do it because I said so and I'm in charge. A leader has the ability to make us want to follow them. A true leader will have so much influence. Let's say they leave an organization. It may be the case that a whole bunch of people might follow that leader to help them start a new organization because it's about the relationship, the connection, and their influence. So at the foundation, leaders and managers' power comes from different sources. Number 2 is about vision versus administration. Leaders cast a vision and align people around that vision. Leaders inspire and empower people to make the vision happen. Managers administrate toward that vision. They organize and structure people and tasks around specific goals and objectives. Management focuses on bureaucratic tasks and processes like budgeting, staffing, procedures, and measuring progress toward those goals. But these are not really opposites. I tend to see these two activities as step 1 and step 2. A leader gets everybody excited about the vision, and the manager translates that into specific goals and objectives needed to get to that big vision. For example, President John Kennedy said in the 1960s that it was his goal or vision to put a man on the moon and bring him back safely by the end of the decade. That's what casting a vision looks like. And then he had to align everybody around that vision. But he didn't manage NASA himself. He didn't create departmental structures around propulsion, navigation, manufacturing. The managers at NASA and other government agencies articulated specific objectives along the way to achieve that vision and accomplish those tasks. And spoiler alert, they did it. In July of 1969, with just 6 months left in the decade, we put human beings on the moon and brought them back safely. A great example of this in pop culture, of this combination, is in the show Parks and Rec. Chris Traeger is the leader with the inspiration and the vision. He gets everybody excited. And Ben Wyatt is the numbers guy who's got to figure out if they can get these things done practically. They make the perfect team on the show, and they play it up for comedy purposes because that's the point of the show. But the characters do represent some of the key differences between leadership and management at work. 3 is about risks and maintenance. Leaders seek to create big change through innovation, and that means taking risks. Managers maintain the system and move more incrementally toward those goals. Again, this is a complementary relationship because leadership is all about stretching people, stretching the organization, oftentimes advocating for radical change. But it's the manager's job to control those risks and keep the foundation of the organization strong. They are counterweights. Another example is how those massive stunts are done in Hollywood movies. Someone, a leader, comes up with a crazy, innovative, risky idea like riding a motorcycle off a cliff and then parachuting to the landing without using CGI. This is what they did in the most recent Mission Impossible movie. Either Tom Cruise or the director said, "We're going to do what's never been done before." That's innovation and risk. That's leadership. And then there has to be somebody else playing the role of manager. And it's their job to manage those risks, to maintain everybody's safety, to make sure that all the equipment is reliable, making sure all the steps are planned and properly followed, making sure they thought of everything that could go wrong, and then finding ways to ensure that nobody gets hurt. Both of those roles are crucial. One cannot exist without the other. Number 4 is about communication. Leaders communicate persuasively and inspirationally, while managers' communication tends to be directive and procedural. And this pulls together many of the previous elements that we've been talking about here. Leaders are always looking for ways to get their followers excited, to fire them up, to bring them along on the journey. They lead from the front with their communication. They say, let's go, let's do this. They have what you might call communication confidence that spreads and gives their followers a similar confidence to commit. Many leaders even have a personal or professional story that their followers resonate with. This isn't always the case, but some leaders have a track record of past success and achievement, and that credibility helps persuade others that they are capable of doing great things. In contrast, managerial communication is more focused, directive, and procedural. Managers communicate deadlines, requirements, expectations, targets. There's an element of accountability built into managerial communication that people who report to these managers are expected to deliver. Those are the top 4 differences. Sometimes one person will do all of these, especially in a smaller organization, because they have to. Usually in larger organizations, they'll hire specific individuals with strong managerial and administrative skills to balance out that leader-driven skill and vision, because ultimately organizations need both management and leadership in equal doses. Question for you: which side do you naturally gravitate toward? Both sides are important. Be sure to take a look at the free class I offer on the top 5 essential communication skills for professionals. There's a link to that in the description below. Until next time, thanks, God bless, and I will see you soon.